Hello guys, in this question we are going to review the domain of square root functions. So one thing you need to understand is that square root function is not defined whenever the argument or whatever is under the root is negative. And if you open Desmos calculator by clicking on the page icon on the top right of the page and opening it in a sidebar, so it hovers over your practice exam, which I would also highly recommend during an exam doing something like that. So if you were to plug in square root, like if you were to type SQRT, by the way, it's a shortcut for square root. If you type something like square root of -1, the calculator tells you that's undefined. That's because square roots of negative numbers, they're undefined because there is no number that you can multiply by itself and get a negative answer. If in real numbers, not imaginary, we're not going to touch that right now, but real numbers, that's not possible. And one other thing that you need to understand is that square root of 0 is 0, and it is defined. There's no problem. So any question that has a square root and they ask you to find the domain, what you do is you zero in on what is that square root, what's under it, and make that greater than or equal to 0. So you're going to solve, you're going to immediately drop the root. So for part A, you're going to say, okay, whatever is under the root, 14 minus x, should be greater than or equal to 0. So important, 0 itself is also included. And you need to solve this inequality for x. Okay, so the first thing we do is we want to isolate x. So I'm going to keep it on the left-hand side, and I'm going to subtract 14 from both sides. Now, the operation of subtraction does not change the inequality sign. So nothing is going to change in terms of the inequality, still going to be greater than or equal to, but 14 and -14 is going to cancel. And on the other side, I'll get -14. Now, here is where a lot of students making mistakes, because when they see this negative, and hopefully you understand that this is the same thing as -1 times x, right? This is -1 times x. So to get rid of the -1, you would divide it by -1, the whole thing. But when you divide by a negative, it's very important. Whether you're multiplying by a negative or dividing by a negative, the sign of the inequality must flip. So, okay, -1 here cancels. So instead of greater than or equal to, you're now going to get less than or equal to. So that's very, very important. And then -14 over -1 is just going to be +14. Okay, so how do I draw this and how do I express this inequality in interval notation? So imagine that there is 14 somewhere there, and there is -infinity on this side, and then there is a +infinity on the other side. Now this sign is less than or equal to 14. So that means we should be shading to the left of 14. So all of that. And then we also need to understand, is 14 included? Well, that depends on whether inequality is strict or not. Strict means it's just less than, not less than or equal to. So because it's not strict, that means that 14 will be a solid dot. So we're going to have to fill it because 14 itself is included. And also when you specify the interval, always go from left to right. So it should be from -infinity to 14. And 14 itself is included. So you're going to need the brackets, the square brackets, not parentheses. Okay, so that's going to be the answer here. Now, the other thing that I would also recommend before you submit anything is to just plug in some x values and make sure that this is correct. Because if you, for example, thought that maybe it's 14 to infinity, you would have thought wrong. Well, if you were to plug in something like 15 or 16, what do you see happening? Well, it's undefined because you get a negative number. But if you plug in something like 13, or 12 or whatever, that's fine. It gives you an answer. So that means this is likely correct. Okay, next, this next function is exactly the same thing. So here we got our g of x equals square root of -6 plus 3x. Again, regardless of what else is going on, you can have a number in front of it, you can have +5 or whatever. You ignore all of that when you find the domain. The only thing you need to worry about is what is under the root. So this is under the root, and you're going to copy that thing that's under the root, and you're going to make it greater than or equal to 0. Okay, and then that means you have to solve this inequality. So the first thing we do is we want to isolate the x term. Well, it's 3x here. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. That's gonna cancel it here. And then I will get 3x greater than or equal to 6. The next thing to solve for x, to isolate it, would be divide by 3. Remember, this is multiplication here. So I'm dividing by 3 both sides. Now, do I need to flip the inequality sign? Always ask yourself that. If you are adding a number or subtracting a number to both sides, the inequality sign doesn't change. If you're dividing or multiplying by a positive number, the inequality sign doesn't change. But if you're dividing or multiplying by a negative number, the inequality sign flips. Now here it's a positive number, so no change in the inequality sign. So this is going to be x greater than or equal to 6 divided by 3 is 2. So how do I go ahead and express that in interval notation? Well, imagine that 2 is here and it's greater than or equal to 2. So I need to shade everything to the right of 2, including 2 itself, right? Because it's greater than or equal to. So this is going to be a solid dot. So this is going to start at 2. 2 is included, so square brackets, and go all the way to positive infinity, which is on the right side. Always start from the left to right. So this particular answer would be 2, comma, and then infinity you can just choose from the toolbar. And make sure that anytime you have infinity, it is always parentheses, never square brackets. Whether it's negative infinity or positive infinity, doesn't matter. You cannot ever reach infinity. You can't. It's too far away. Okay.